Good morning, everybody. Well, I think we're here. All of the board members who are going to be here today are present. So as the president of the TriMet Board of Directors, I'm going to call the regular meeting of our board for July 23rd, 2014 to order. And the first item on the agenda is our public forum. And for those of you who are new to our board meetings, the public forum is held at 9 o'clock for a maximum of 45 minutes. Individual comments are limited to 2 to 3 minutes because of the limited number of folks signed up today. We'll go to 3 minutes for each person. Again, those individuals who wish to share additional information may complete a comment card that will be provided to the board and made part of the board record. I would point out that we also have in our board packets all of the information and correspondence that we get between our meetings are forwarded us, so we do have those. The public forum, just again for those of you not familiar with it, begins 30 minutes prior to the actual public forum, so the sign-up was from 8:30 until now. The sign-up promptly closes at 9 a.m. and the comments will be taken in the order of sign-up, and we have, as I said, a limited number. We have 7 this morning, so I'm going to call you up 2 at a time, okay? And again, look forward to hearing from you. So the first person signed up is John Charles from the Cascade Policy Institute, and then Chris Wallen representing the CAT. So Chris, okay. Good morning, John.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. My name is John Charles, President of Cascade Policy Institute. I'm here to talk about Resolution 14-07-37, Strategic Finance Plan. And I do appreciate the fact that I was invited previously to address the subcommittee of the board for 15 or 20 minutes. I enjoyed the conversation. It was fun to be casual without all the rigmarole of a public hearing. And I'm not surprised that my ideas are not incorporated in your strategic plan, which would be fine if I thought your plan was going to work, but I don't think it will for the following reasons. It's not really a strategic plan. It's a set of aspirational guidelines. Guidelines are nice. There's a place for them. But if you look at your 6 elements of the plan, the word should is in every sentence. And I agree, you should do those things. But that doesn't mean you're going to do them, and it doesn't mean you have even the capacity to do them. I believe a strategic plan needs to focus on short-term actions that you will take and that you have the sufficient authority to take. And the biggest problem you have in terms of maintaining a cost of operations that's affordable is you don't have any authority. You have a series of contracts you're trying to renegotiate that have a 30-year history, and you've had no success. And I don't see how you will have any success. And not that I'm criticizing people on the other side of the table. What they're doing is completely rational. So, I'll give you an examples that I gave the board, the committee. You could have a strategic plan that says we will place a moratorium on selling any more revenue bonds backed by payroll taxes. That would stop the bleeding caused by your senior lien bonds. Every time you sell them and you pay off, you send money to Wall Street. That's money not going to bus service or train service. That's totally in your control. You can't blame that on anybody else. And you've been piling up debt for decades. You could just say, in our strategic plan, we will have a moratorium for 3 years. We will not sell any more bonds. Okay, I would respect that. You could say, we will take every effort we can to shrink the geographic size of the district, because then we could, by cooperating with other jurisdictions, so that we can shrink the number of employees we have, because our employees basically cost too much. Or you could say, we will take bids from vendors around the world to operate TriMet on a concession basis. There's no particular reason why the operations you have now, the setup, is necessarily the best or only. In a lot of ways, it probably isn't. You could take bids to contract out all of your operations. So I just close by saying, you don't have to do this today. You could defer, and you could ask your committee to come back with a second option that compares yours right now with all the shoulds versus a different scenario that says, here's the things we will do. Thank you.
I think we'll probably want to address some of these comments during the resolution, or do you have some comments you'd like to make?
I do have a couple, if that's okay.
Please.
I do, I appreciate your comments, and I do take issue a little bit with your comment that your comment submitted to the subcommittee had no impact, because I think Travis and I did listen to you, and I think we made some changes. I do agree with you that the plan is not proscriptive to the extent that you're talking about, and frequently plans are that way. We did choose to focus on principles, and I think it's important, particularly in a large organization, and I think in a public organization where there are a lot of competing demands, to make sure that we're very clear about the principles that should be followed. I don't have as much of a problem with the word should as you do, obviously. But I think it's very important to be very explicit about that. The one point that I do want to make clear to you is I personally do think that your comments that you said before and you've repeated today, that we do need to get more specific. I think you're right. And that is why we modified the draft of the plan, and what is included in this plan is a requirement that each year staff comes to us before the budget process starts with a set of actions and steps that they feel are necessary to implement those guidelines in the coming year. So rather than lay it out over a 5-year period, we will be getting that. And I thank you for that comment, because I think it's valid, and this is a way that we're trying to respond to that. So,
Well, thank you. I'm glad I had some effect. I just might suggest that instead of reporting back on an annual basis, you might ask your staff to report back monthly or bi-monthly, because I think the clock, if I understand it, the clock is ticking on when you have a real problem in FY17.
I was wanting to talk to you today about signage on the mall for people with disabilities and phone service, because I'm pretty familiar with around the Portland building and the stops around here for Lyft, but there's no discernible, okay, please wait here. I'm not very familiar with other parts of the mall, and sometimes I get lost and have trouble finding things easy, like a lot of people would for the first time being in a new location, especially on the mall where it's so busy. So just as you have bus number signs marked out, and you are able to have those type of things marked out, I think it would be important to have that, as well as closer phone service, so we don't have to cross streets and walk over to a payphone while we're waiting for a bus and possibly miss our bus. So I had a 6-hour experience where I missed a couple cabs trying to find the right stop, and finally was able to connect because I made it to the right stop. But it was just gets frustrating when you're reading for the right thing, and yeah, so that's it. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Chris. Maybe that's something staff could follow up and see, again, if there's some, okay, thank you very much, I appreciate it. I have the next 5 speakers. It looks like they're all members of Opal and want to talk to us about the Youth Pass and program. So again, I hope that you will not repeat yourself as you go forward, but I'll call you up 2 at a time. So we have Sam Levin with Opal Environmental Justice and Lupita Velasquez, and without the affiliation, but I assume it's Opal also. Would you 2 please come up? morning. Sam, are you first?
Yes. Good morning. Can you hear? Okay. Okay, good. Good morning, Chair Warner, and members of the board. Oh. Okay. Thank you. My name is Sam. I'm an organizer and training intern at Opal Environmental Justice Oregon. And I want to share some of my story as well as the central reason why I organize with bus riders today. I also want to add some testimony on how not providing youth passes to all youth in Portland, especially low-income youth of color, hurts them and their families' livelihoods. Ultimately, I voice a demand to TriMet to consider providing free transportation access to all youth in Multnomah County. So, long story short, I have extensive experience with being out of touch with my community when it comes to public transportation issues. Dependence on public transportation has never characterized my life experience. I was raised in Mission Viejo, Orange County, California, where I grew up a youth of color. In the meantime, my values and transportation-related realities I saw were influenced by my particular situation within the suburban sprawl. As such, I took transportation for granted. There was always a car for me to drive because my family, as well as every family I knew, owned or was paying off a car, and the yellow buses were just there for the interim time before I tested for a driver's license. I never questioned how I would get to school or do anything much at all if I didn't have access to any of these resources. So by the time I was leaving Orange County for college in Portland, if I considered someone's situation when I saw that they didn't drive, own a car because they were slowly paying for one, or rode a bike, I only thought so far to find that either they or their parents lacked the initiative, the intelligence, the whatnot to pull hard on some bootstraps and make money for a car. Then, for many reasons, riding the bus wasn't a central part of my college experience either. Generally speaking, this was the result of never having to leave college for anything except recreational activities and also regaining access to a car through my parents. It wasn't until after I left college that I fully realized just how out of touch I'd been with my community despite all the social and economic theory I'd learned and talked about at school. Newly forming friendships and joining the community of volunteers and staff at Opal have since inspired me to develop and pass on my skills as a community organizer. I want to aid my community in creating a world which simply existing as a person of color bears absolutely no punishment. This is why I organize with bus riders who depend on public transportation in order to live their daily lives, especially my fellow youth of color whose families draw low incomes. Through my organizing efforts with other organizers in training, I recognize that TriMet does not offer all high school students within Multnomah County a youth pass. I've listened to students at schools outside of the Portland Public School District, especially David Douglas, voice their frustrations about not having access to youth pass through TriMet and how it hurts them and their families financially. One youth in particular, Milka, expressed that she and her family would be helped by having youth pass available to them because it would ease stress off their budget. As such, I want to voice a demand to TriMet to extend youth pass access to all schools within the Multnomah County rather than simply within the Portland Public School District. Thank you.
Good comments.
Next question. You've talked about providing free passes to youth within Multnomah County. What about youth in Clackamas County and Washington County?
I think if TriMet extends out that far, they should also have access to.
TriMet does extend out that far.
Okay, then they should.
And the reason I ask is I have heard, as youth have come forward, there's a lot of talk about providing, that you'd like to see this benefit to students in Multnomah County, but I've never heard a word about the other two counties, and we are a 3-county district.
Okay, thank you.
Can I go? Okay. Good morning, members of the TriMet board. My name is Lupita, and I am an organizer in training at Opal this summer. And this is my story. Waking up in the mornings when the sun is still not out. Waking up to nothing but the world. Waking up to the smell of coffee and morning dew. This is what captured my childhood due to the fact that my mother worked early in the morning and she needed to catch the bus earlier than that. There was times where money was an obstacle and she didn't have enough to pay her fee. This was not the end of the story. Getting out after dark is what also affected my family and me. Being at work all day and then coming back home on TriMet is what determined if I would get to play with my mother. Sometimes the bus would come late and she would have to wait 30 to 40 minutes. But by the time she got home, it was my bedtime. However, this is not the end of the story with my TriMet experience. What is a student without youth pass? I went to Park Rose, and all throughout my high school career, I didn't have youth pass. This determined what opportunities and jobs I could hold. What had been my mother's struggle once was mine now. Me coming from a low-income family, I didn't always have the means to pay my fare. Going to the job interview would have to wait. Going to the community service opportunity would never happen. What's even more sad about this situation is of not having a youth pass is some of my peers would get left behind because they didn't have the money to pay their fare. That is, going to a community service. However, this is just my story. Many of my friends relying on TriMet has affected their way of living situation. Coming to school late because the TriMet bus was late and there was no frequent service has been the key to take summer school. Imagine having to go to summer school and the only source of transportation is through TriMet. Well, it looks like those students are screwed again. I've encountered people that don't have money to buy their full day pass and bought the 2-hour ticket to go to doctor's appointments and didn't have enough time to come back on that same ticket. What happens to those people? It sounds like they're screwed too. Do you see a trend here? If you don't, I do. I see the struggle of opportunity. What my mom went through and what I went through is just a recurring trend. People are still struggling to pay their fares. People are still having to wait for buses that are supposed to be there 20 minutes ago. Students are still having to walk a mile or two to get to work or to school. Students are still left out from life-changing opportunities because they don't have youth pass. These are the reoccurring issues. These are the issues of the people. These are the issues of my family. These are the issues. These are my issues and are still my issues. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, thank you both. Appreciate the comments. Janelle Mazzaro and Bree Kame also wanted to talk to us about youth access. Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning, members of the board. My name is Joelle, and I am an organizer in training with Opal Environmental Justice Oregon this summer. I'm talking about youth access to transportation. I ride the bus every day, and it has helped me get to the places that I need to be, like school, and also my internship with Opal. I do not own a car, so the bus is my primary mode to transportation, and fortunately, I live in an area where there are multiple transit options. There are 3 bus lines that run right by my house, so I can easily walk to them, and this has been a really good thing for me, but also the bus has helped me get where I need to go, and the high cost of fares has also hindered my ability to ride the bus. Since I graduated high school, I now have to buy a $2.50 fare or buy a monthly $100 pass, which is simply unaffordable for me. And I'm not the only one facing this problem. Through the Organizers in Training program, I've met other youth who also struggle to pay for the bus fares. I also met another recent high school graduate whose family is really burdened now by having to buy a $100 monthly pass. That takes out a lot of a person's income, especially if they're low income. And this obstacle of paying for the bus really hurts the young people who are very reliant on public transportation. Since transportation links people to resources and opportunities, such limits can negatively impact a young person's life by forcing them to give up on things they care about. So for example, youth use the bus to go to school, work, extracurricular activity, cultural events throughout the city. But if they can't afford to ride the bus to get there, then they're forced to give up on these things. And high fares and inadequate service are blocking their ability to enjoy these essential opportunities. So they can't really live their life the way they really want to because of the high fares. So I believe that as youth, our experiences are real, and we deserve high-quality bus system that meets and responds to our needs. And I really urge the members of the board to engage with youth, to listen to them, their stories and their experiences, and to respond to their needs, because it really makes a huge impact on our lives. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. Okay.
Good morning, Board of Directors. Thank you. Thank you for taking the time to listen to us today. I'm speaking before you today to convey the dire urgency of youth access to transportation in Portland. This is an issue that's affected me directly over the years. As a concerned member of my community, I see it as my obligation to make sure that those who are unable to make it to this meeting this morning due to work or summer school still have a chance for these issues to be heard. I was born and raised in East Portland. I grew up there my whole life. I started using TriMet when I was in middle school, and safe access to transit has never really been available in this part of town. The bus lines have always been few and far between. I remember that there's never really been very great sidewalks out there. Crosswalks have gotten better over the years, but they're still pretty hard to come by, and it's pretty dangerous to cross the street out there. With the bus stops being few and far between, it leads to overcrowding, and people are left with no other choice than to walk long distances in between their stops and their location. This problem is magnified by the lack of sidewalks, safe streetlights, and crosswalks all around the east side. Expanding the Youth Pass to all Portland area school districts would be a great first step for TriMet to show that they really understand who depends on their services. With the overwhelmingly positive feedback that we received from Youth Pass when it was expanded to Portland Public Schools, I don't think that expanding it to East Portland would make that any different. I've watched the city change dramatically over the past 20 years, from the time I was young until now. I've seen the sweeping displacement of communities of color from North and Northeast Portland, many of whom I know have moved out to East Portland, and the TriMet infrastructure has so far not been able to keep up with that growth in population. Stores and services are now further away from people's homes, out of walking distance, and they rely on transit more and more. In the fall, I spent time with the Multnomah Youth Commission, Portland State University, and Opal, where we conducted a series of focus groups with high school students in East Portland about their access to transit. Overwhelmingly, people said that they would, if they had Youth Pass, they would volunteer more, join sports teams, school clubs, look for jobs, and I think that this should be something that all youth should have access to. Is my time up? Okay.
Thank
Cool.
you for your comments.
Yeah, thank you very much. Actually, I got just
Okay,
a quick comment.
please.
Well said. Your presentation was well done. Greatly appreciate you taking the time and coming talking to us. Your reference to what's going on in the East Portland, outer East County is, I think, spot on. I think the challenges that we face out there are pretty enormous. And again, your presentation was, I think, right on. And I will further that just to say that the infrastructure for TriMet needs some assistance and some work, and we've identified that, and we're working on the East Side Enhancement Plan to help address that. But it's not just TriMet that also needs some additional infrastructure out on the East Portland side. There's a lot of infrastructure, everything from social services to transportation issues that also need additional assistance out in that part of the region. So I'd welcome Opal's focus, especially in the area of transportation infrastructure, sidewalks, things like that. I should say Opal's continued effort, because Opal has done a great job of being at the table in regards to those issues, also making sure that those sidewalks and things are in place for the folks who are transit dependent that need to get to and from, our infrastructure that is in place. And we are well aware of the adjustments and changes that we need to have from a TriMet perspective, but your additional help in those other areas will go a long way to assist us in doing what we need to do also. So thank you for coming.
Thank you.
I think I skipped over Stacy Villalobos. Is she here? Stacy? I apologize.
So hi, good morning, everyone. I'm also an organizer in training at Opal this summer, but unlike my peers, I am not a native to Portland. I am a queer Chicana from Southern California. I moved up here about 4 years ago this summer in the pursuit of a BA in art and Spanish at Portland State University, and because I wanted to become a teacher and an educator. And fortunately, I have been able to have that experience in Portland, working with youth, seeing the diversity in the cultures in the students that I've taught Spanish to, and thinking in the future how, and also now having experience working with Opal, transportation is a big issue with how those students get to school. Not just get to school, but are able to attend and have access to after-school programs, which is really important for the livelihood of those students. And this is the first time I ever ridden on the bus all the way out to East Portland. I've had the privilege to, have lived in mostly downtown, the east side of Portland, the inner east side, and I've been lucky enough to have a lot of transit lines pass by my house. But every now and then when I go out to the east side or North Portland, I see this pattern that the more out I go, the less services there are. The more shabby looking shelters there are, or no shelters. They're obsolete. There are no benches, there are no shelters. I mean, it rains all year round in Portland, and these folks need a shelter to stand under. Or folks that have limited mobility need a bench or something. So it's really disappointing for me to see that, and knowing that I have a lot of friends that have relatives or friends, other friends with mobility, or they're just elderly, and then it takes them a while to walk around or get around. And so having that in mind, that's one thing. I mean, one of the many things that TriMet needs to work on. But again, bringing it back to youth, again, like I said, I was a Portland State University student. I just graduated, so I don't get the flex pass anymore. So I have to budget my income now as a post-grad, looking for work, to see how can I afford that. I do have the privilege that I still have mobility and that I can walk and bike around town, but a lot of other youth don't have that privilege and also don't own a bike, or just can't afford it, because the majority of folks that are transit dependent are low income and people of color, and a lot of them are youth. And it's a privilege for the students in Portland public school districts to have that access, and I wish that it would extend to other schools as well. Not just how Craig Proser said, we only mentioned Multnomah County, but I think starting with Multnomah County would be a huge first step into getting to the other counties. So I just wanted to clarify that we eventually want all youth in Portland, Oregon, all Oregon to get a free bus pass, but you need to take those steps first. Thank you.
Thank you, Stacy. So that concludes our public forum this morning. There were some comments and questions. Go ahead.
I want to thank all the youth for coming forward and talking to us. As Director Stovall said, the conditions that you described, on the east end of our district are absolutely spot on. I would encourage folks to also go out to the west end of the district. You'll find exactly the same thing. We do have communities of color who've moved out to the west side. We have them low-income areas out there. We have low-income areas and communities of color in the south side. It's true for our entire district. And that's why I did raise the question about why just focusing on Multnomah County. I think it's also important to remember that this board has reduced youth fare from $1.75 to $1.25, and that'll take effect in September 1st. So that's part of what this board is doing to help provide access. The Portland Public Schools Youth Pass is a partnership between the City of Portland, Portland Public Schools, and TriMet. And in lowering the youth fare, we have tried to set up a program that is available to every school district in this district. So if school districts in East Multnomah County, in Washington County, in Clackamas County want to partner with us by paying for a portion of the youth pass, if local governments want to also contribute in that, there's an opportunity now for every youth in this district to have a similar program. But it will rely on partnerships with those other jurisdictions. And so I would strongly encourage Opal and other interested youth to talk to the other districts and make sure that they're aware that this opportunity is out there. We'd love to partner with them. So thank you.
Good.
Just one other comment that I would like to ask for some clarity on, and Opal, you can address this at a later time or respond to us by an email. When you make your presentations, you talk about low-income and transit-dependent persons. But in this request, you're expanding it to all youth. Now, if all youth means exactly ALL youth, then you're asking all of this to be extended to even those who perhaps may be middle class, upper class, who can afford passes. Are you asking seriously that all youth are included in the pass, or are you asking specifically for low income and transit dependent? Just something for you to think about when you talk and make your presentations from one to the other. Which are you really asking and zeroing in on?
Good comment. Again, I would just say thank you on behalf of the board for you folks coming in. I think Director Prosser did a very good job of outlining where we are with the Youth Pass program. And we stand willing and ready to work with any school district and with the local governments to make this a pass program work throughout the Portland metro region. And I think it probably should. I think it's a great model, and I think it's something that should be explored. So I'd encourage you to as Mr. Director Prosser said, talk with some of the other entities out there too to get their attention on this rather than just TriMet. And I think the other thing I would say in terms of the shelters, we are very keenly aware of that, and I want to acknowledge Opal for working to identify, what was it, the top 10 worst sites, stops in our region. And I know that one that was at the top of the list, I think, was 122nd and Powell. And I was very pleased the last time I drove through there to see the sidewalks, new shelter. It clearly is people, including the county and the state through ODOT, are putting a lot of money into that facility to make sure that there's adequate and safe pedestrian access as well as shelters. So again, if you see those individual shelters that need attention and you have a suggestion, please get those to us, because I think we do have a budget for upgrading and doing work on our shelters on a regular basis, and I think the ones that are critically important are the ones we ought to focus on first. So if you have some ideas and thoughts there, please get those to us. Very good. Okay, I'm ready to close the public forum and move on to the regular agenda. So we're going to jump right into the board reports. Dr. Bethel, do you have a report? I think it's in our packets on the Committee on Accessible Transportation.
Yes, you do have in your packet the report on the Committee on Accessible Transportation. We'll continue to work on the issues and take input from members of the CAT and others. concerning things that are around the ADA and disability. I think one of the ones that perhaps are focusing on most right now will be in terms of how stations are being built out. Chris mentioned earlier today in his comments about signage. I know there was a discussion in the last meeting about signage, and so as TriMet continues to work on that and look at that, I'm pretty sure, and I feel confident that the signage will begin to improve and begin to address some of the issues that CAP members are bringing to us at this time. At that, you have the report. If there's anything else, I'll be glad to answer any questions that you might have.
Any questions for Dr. Bithell? All right. Well, let's keep you on the hot seat then. How about the Accountability Committee? Do you
Well,
have
moving on to the Accountability Committee, known as TAC for short, the Accountability Committee. At our last meeting on July 18th, we reviewed and discussed the results of our electronic survey, which included a number of suggestions that helped us to improve, refine, and then even begin to supplement that website of the Accountability Center. And I do invite you to take a look at the website and go to the Accountability Center and see how it is. It's been arranged very nicely, we believe, in terms of making it easy in terms of people accessing information. We also had from the Secretary of State's audit was a hotline for employees to talk about fraud, waste, or abuse of TriMet resources, and having it be done by an independent third party. We're on track of having that to kick off come September 1, with some beta testing being done before that time, and under budget, we're going to go live. And we'll give you more on that in August 13th board meeting about what's happening with that hotline. The committee, we also reviewed our prior month statistics regarding visits to the website. We've had over 500-page reviews, and most of those pages being in order of volume, they're looking at public records. So TriMet's agency org chart, the leadership team, audited financial statements, and the performance dashboard, and the TriMet's board. Those are all tabs that you will find on the website, and that order is about how many who have been viewing that part of the site, where they're hitting by pushing that button. Okay, any questions that you might have?
Questions?
All right, thank you.
I guess I just make comment. First off, thank you for your service on both of those committees. And I have looked at the accountability section on our website, and I would submit to you and to everybody in the audience or watching that this agency is probably the most transparent of any I've ever been around in terms of putting information out there, allowing folks to gain access to all of the information that we see here as the board. So congratulations, and I'm pleased to see it. It looks like you're pretty pleased with the way things are moving. Great, appreciate it. Thank you very much. All right, then let's move on to the Metro Policy Advisory Committee, MPAC. Mr. Prosser, do you have an update for us?
Just a couple of things. At their last meeting, which unfortunately I missed because I was on vacation, MPAC did take a field trip out to Forest Grove specifically to look at the Grove Link service that is in Forest Grove. That was that's a shuttle service that operates within the city of Forest Grove, connecting to TriMet bus line. And that was a cooperative program between the city of Forest Grove, TriMet, and Rideshare. It's been a very successful program, and MPAC was interested in learning more about that, hopefully to see how those types of programs could be replicated elsewhere to deal with some of the service issues in the outlying areas. Tonight, MPAC is meeting. They're going to be considering a Metro Charter Amendment dealing with neighborhood density, and they're also going to be looking at the release of the long-range population forecast for the region, which is done prior to updating the growth projections and growth plans. So that's what's on at MPAC.
Questions of Director Prosser? Thank you, and again, thank you for staying with that committee and providing us updates. It's greatly appreciated. And then the final board report we have is the Finance and Audit Committee. And Director Prosser, I believe you were absent most of the last meeting, so I think we're going to ask Director Stovall to give us an update on the Finance and Audit Committee.
Excellent. Good morning, fellow board members. Just briefly to touch on the Finance and Audit Committee, this is one of my most favorite times of the year, being part of the audit committee, being part of the Finance and Audit Committee, because this was the pre-audit meeting with Moss Adams. So I know everybody enjoys the audit time of the year, and so again, this is one of my favorites, and I'm being facetious. If you do like audits, we need to talk. So, we did have an opportunity to meet with Moss Adams to kick off our pre-audit meeting for this year. And Julie, boy, that's a tough last name. Since she's not here, I will try it. Desimone? Desimone? Good, thank good. Well, this is being taped, so she probably will follow up on this. Julie Desimone, the engagement partner and the engagement reviewer, and I believe actually their CEO was also in attendance to that meeting. Moss Adams, CEO, was in town, had the opportunity to kind of shadow Julie during that day, so it was great to actually have an opportunity to meet him. And one of the main, a couple of the key main things that we talked about are the audit deliverables, the audit process, and specifically we spent a little bit of time on the new accounting standards impacting TriMet in regards to the pension accounting standards. And as some of you know, some of the things that are going on with the pension that we need to do, we need to follow some additional GASB government accounting standards that are coming up that we need to include in our reporting, and some of these things are focused on the pension, some of it's focused on the pension liabilities, and some of those things that will be added to our balance sheet over time, which will increase some of the things that we have to report. And so that's good for transparency and getting information out there. We talked about some key and significant audit areas, including capital assets, financial reporting, and closing processes, bonds and leases, grant reporting compliance, and some Oregon minimum standards. And then we also talked about any type of audit consideration of fraud. So that's something we discuss every year to ensure that we've got our eye on that. And then something called materiality. I won't venture into what that actually means, but it's something that they actually look at. And following that meeting, we'll actually take the Finance and Audit Committee will meet with Moss Adams in a preliminary meeting on September 10th, and then bringing it to the full board for September 24th. So that just gives you an idea of when you'll be able to get to see that information, I believe, on September 24th, and you'll have an opportunity to be excited about the audit process also. Additionally, the Finance and Audit Committee did our annual review of the committee charter, and there was one minor change, and that minor change was really focused on requiring a yearly review and kind of the development of some actions for the next year that the Audit Committee, the Finance and Audit Committee, will look at for the next annual process. So that's the only change in our charter. It was just really to tighten the language there. And I believe that summarizes all the discussions. President Warner was there, and then actually Director Prosser did have an opportunity to join us, so I don't know if you guys have anything to add, but other than that, I think that summarizes the meeting.
I thank you very much. I think I'd just add that we really do welcome and like working with our auditors, because this is part of our role as the board, is to ensure that our finances are in order and things are being recorded properly, and our monies are being used in a proper way. And so that's the intent of the annual audit. And I believe that you can also get our past audits online if you're interested in looking those, but we feel very good, and we've received clean audits for many, many years, and very pleased to see that, and I'm hoping that we see the similar result after review of this year's audit. So thank you, appreciate that. Okay, well, let's move on then to our regular agenda. We have the consent agenda, which is items that, I'm sorry, thank you very much. I skipped over the general manager's report. I didn't mean to. Maybe I'm just trying to get out of here quickly. But Mr. General Manager, would you like to report to us today on some issues?
Good morning, President Ward and members of the board. I won't take it personally, and I'll take that as a hint to try to be as brief as I possibly can. But I wanted to just start with a few items. One is ridership, and as you have probably seen in some of our reports, ridership for June was up. Overall, depends on how you sort of decide to count it, but weekly ridership was up 2.3% for the system overall. That was led with very encouraging ridership results on our bus system. responding, I think, to the new service investments we made in March in terms of additional frequent services, intervals during the day. The bus system was up, if you look at weekly ridership, up 5.7%. If you look at weekday ridership, up 6.4%. Again, when we look at where that performance was really occurring and improving, that was really the frequent service lines that were really carrying the bulk of that. Max was down a little bit, 2.6%. Part of that was weekend ridership was actually down 5.9%. That is a little apples to oranges comparison because we had a number of Rose Festival events actually in May this year because of the way the calendar fell, not in June, which is usually sees a ridership spike around both of the parades associated with the Rose Festival. I'd also just note that West continues to make strong ridership gains. It was up 9.8% in June compared to June of last year. So again, very encouraging results. And as you know, we have additional service investments planned for September 1st and then again in December. So we are expecting to see, hopefully, continued response on the part of our customers to this improvements in service that you've approved in the annual budget. Related to another, yes, sir.
One quick question on so we did the service improvements, and we've seen a subsequent gain in ridership. How are they matching to our projections that we set out as we did the service improvements?
I think the actual ridership numbers have been higher than we would have predicted. But I think all in all, what we're also trying to track is what does that meant to revenue, to passenger revenue in beginning. And I don't really have the answer to that question. I think it will take a couple of months of experience before we can really report to you about that as well.
Excellent, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Related to the Line 8 layover, as you recall at your last briefing, we talked to you about the process that we've been going through and gave you an update on where that process was. We are underway with some additional work to sharpen the estimate about the potential off-site layover zone so that you have a greater level of confidence in the cost associated with that. But we're also looking at some of the service alternatives that have been suggested by members of the community. I'll be meeting with the team later this week to begin to, if you will, corral that information. Hope to bring that back to you at a future meeting before we take any action in any regard on that. I would say that probably we'll have a report in August at your meeting, but we may still have some additional work to do after that, particularly related to service alternatives and communication with the neighborhood representatives. So continues to be a work in progress. I also wanted to report to you, and there is a memo in your packet and available, is related to the non-represented compensation program. And you might recall that in your budget and during public review, there was a proposal that was approved ultimately in your budget that created a pool of funds, equivalent to about 3% of the non-union salary pool overall. And that was then to be distributed based on the merit program that we have for non-union employees. Managers have now completed the merit program adjustments, and the budget for the increased salaries actually came in a little bit less than the budget that was established for that. I'd also just emphasize in terms of context that this merit increase is the second merit increase available for non-union employees in 5 years. So it has been a number of years where we have been not regular in terms of taking care of the salary structure. And again, I'm following the direction I've heard from the board, which is we want a competitive salary program. We want one that's market-based, that can retain high-quality employees and actually attract new high-quality employees when we have the opportunity to do so. I'd also emphasize that these were merit increases. These are not cost of living increases. So the merit increase was allocated based on the employee's performance, based on that employee's contribution to the agency, based on their overall total compensation. And as you know, some employees have different benefit tiers associated with their compensation, and also salary placement in relation to the market. So all of those factors were taken into account as we did this. I said I would also note that we did a number of tests on the results to make sure that the results were not discriminatory in any way, and we had very favorable outcomes related to that. I'd also note that the increase becomes effective July 6th, and employees will see that increase on their July 30th paycheck. I'd also just note, in parallel to this, we are continuing our negotiations with the ATU, and as you may know, we have a salary increase proposed, actually, in that case, a cost of living increase proposed for the third year, if you will, of the ATU contract, which actually would begin in December. So that's the year that generally aligns with the budget year that we're in right now. And that's a 3% raise as well in our proposal. And so that will continue to be part of the conversation with the union as we move ahead in mediation sessions scheduled for the next month. I would also just note that the union increase, as I noted, is a cost of living increase. But while the contract is being negotiated, union workers who are eligible still receive some wage increases, such as step increases or longevity increases. So those increases do continue to take place. So again, material provided in your packet, and I'm happy to answer any questions you might have on that. Board Member Stovall noted my next comment, which is you don't have financials at your beck and call today because of the year-end process of closing and preparing for the audit. So we'll have those available for you in August at your August meeting for the year-end fiscal 13. And again, as noted, the auditors are working on the audit as we speak, and again, we will be presenting the results of that to you at your September meeting. Usually that's very early in the sequence of presenting public audits, so we always like to be amongst the first to complete that process. I'd also note that you'll have the chance to meet our new CFO, hired Dee Brookshire, who comes from the Sacramento Regional Transit System. Very experienced, taking the place of another very experienced individual, Dave Oxier, who will be leaving us for re-retirement, as we say. And we'll have her, she will be here actually starting work on August 18th. So again, your first meeting that you'll see her will actually be a September board meeting, but we may have the opportunity to introduce her in the meantime. And finally, I just wanted to let you know that it is summertime, and one reason that we know it's summertime is that we see a lot of new faces around the TriMet offices. And we have a very active internship program going on. I would also remind you that we participate with the summer work program through Work Systems, Inc., and we actually have 30 high school students interning with us in the different departments, such as public affairs and capital projects. We have a number of those interns helping us with outreach on the Portland-Milwaukee bus service plan, for example, and recruiting members for the Riders Club, among other tasks. And we do rotate our interns into the different fields of the operations, so they get a little more experience with TriMet. For many of these young people, it's obviously their first job, and so they bring to us a great deal of energy, diversity, and insight into our work, and we really do appreciate their contributions, and we're really very pleased to have them here. My last item was just to note that as we have passed on to you, that there was a resolution of the Title VI complaint that was filed by Opal related to a past effort or action that you took related to equalizing transfer times. Again, the Opal complaint was not sustained by the FTA, and our actions were upheld. But again, part of the process that the FTA noted is that there has been a rule change since that original action has taken place, and that any such further transfer time evaluation or change would require a Title VI review. And so, what I would like to just note to you is that what we do is to intend to come back to you at your August briefing and meeting with a, if you will, schedule and an outline of the activities that we would need to undertake that review for your consideration. It may be that there are other fair policy issues that we want to wrap into this Title VI evaluation at the same time, and so we'll brief you on what some of those issues are in the near term as well. But I think that was good news in terms of sustaining your actions, and also good news in terms of sustaining the action to hold off on any transfer change until a Title VI evaluation was actually completed. With that, I'd pause for any questions before we get into the safety presentation.
Questions or comments?
Yeah, I have a question. It's just more of a concern to find out in the merit increase process, I think there was like 440 or so employees that were
Yes.
that were eligible for this, and just a little over 400 received merit increases, and so there was a small gap of 20 or 30 who did not receive one. And it just raises a concern with me, is that if those employees, and I know all the time we don't have employees who deserve by merit, but my heart kind of goes out for the ones who did not, because it's been such a long time. And so the question that comes down is, what is TriMet doing, particularly in HR or through the department head, where there is an employee who did not get a merit, to help them improve and kind of put them on an improvement track, so that however the next time this come up, they may be eligible for that. I just don't want to see them left there. You know, if you're of the 20 who didn't out of 440, it does have an effect on your morale in terms of how you work, and if there isn't something that's a positive being pushed up. I appreciate the other extra work that was done to make sure that things were, on level with no biases or anything like that, or discrimination. But I think it would be worth looking into the why of that small group and how to help them move forward to be eligible the next time.
Perhaps I can give a very brief response, but I think that would be actually a great topic to come back on, a briefing topic in the near term. But in general, what we actually do is put employees on an improvement plan and actually try to spell out quite methodically what the employee needs to do to improve their performance and improve their rating. And again, that's, to me, really a very key part of this overall evaluation process, to sort of move everybody to the highest performance that they're capable of. So that is part of the process. I would also note that some of those that didn't receive an increase weren't eligible in some regard because perhaps they were hired after a certain threshold date, and so if they're a brand new employee, they weren't eligible, or relatively new employee, they weren't eligible for an increase. So what I can't tell you is the number that fall into that category versus those that simply received no increase at all. But we can get back to Oh, okay. So I covered the whole situation. 100% of those employees were hired after a certain time threshold, so they weren't eligible for the increase.
Thank you.
Yep.
Good comment. Other questions of the general manager? Okay, why don't we move on then to the next report, the safety update, the rule book continuous improvement team's efforts.
Yes, I'd like to call up Dennis Van Dyke, and Rory Renfro, and one of our operators, who is Carrie Varka. They have been involved in one of our very important continuous improvement teams. And as an obscure topic you might not always recognize, but it's something called a rail rule book. But it's absolutely essential to everybody who is involved in operating our trains. And the difference in terms of this recent update is the process that we went through, and the process that involved the frontline employees and actually reviewing that. So I'd like Dennis to quickly review that with you, if you could.
Morning, Mr. President, members of the board. Last fall, we undertook a revision of the rule book. The last time it was revised was 2010, so it'd been a while since we'd had a chance to go through it. We wanted to get it in shape prior to the changes for the Orange Line coming up this next year. We didn't want to have to do regular updates as well as the Orange Line improvements all at the same time. So that was one of the reasons that we did this past year. The group was composed of two groups, a subject matter expert group that we brought together and went through the rule book, and then the second group was frontline employees, where we took the initial work that was done, gave it to the frontline employees for their feedback. Kerry was one of those folks. Rory is our technical writer, and he kind of kept us in line as we went through the process. Essentially, we had a number of face-to-face meetings, got the draft together, gave it to the front line, and then incorporated almost all of their comments. So it was good feedback. I'll let Carrie talk to that here in just a moment. There were a few challenges getting the group together. It probably took at least a half a dozen meetings, probably 3 to 4 hours each meeting to go through. It's very technical, and we had to get through this and make sure that it was right at the end. We had what, 30? About 30 frontline employees total that actively participated, although like rail equipment maintenance, we actually had 160 people that we gave it to for their feedback, although we only had a small group that actually gave us actual feedback. The outcomes, we were able to complete the book in time for the recert this year, which is just starting now. The first batch has been published and distributed. I think that one of the big things is that employees, when they are involved in writing these rules, they're more likely to follow them and understand why these rules are written, and to follow them as time goes forward. So with that, I'll let Kerry speak to his involvement, and then if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer those for you.
Thank you. Good morning. Yeah, I really appreciate the opportunity to actually be involved in that process. I do appreciate the rule book from our standpoint as an operator. It is a set of rules that really affect us, and they are in place for our purpose, really, for our safety and the safety of other employees. That we're, so it's something that it is good for us to own, because it really does affect us, and it is an important part of what we do. I was mentioning to Dennis earlier that I needed to pull a train out of the shop the other day, and hadn't done that for about a year or so, and so it was good to just be able to pull out my rule book and go over that procedure and say, okay, I want to make sure I do everything right. So from that standpoint, that gives you a little idea of why we have a rule book, and why it's important to us as rail operators and maintenance of way people, people that are working on the right of way and so forth, that it's for their protection also. We want to know that we're all on the same page, so that we are protecting each other from the workings of the railroad. So, and I had the privilege of being able to make some comments on the, I was sort of that second tier frontline employee that was able to look at it and make some clarifications, and if there was something I didn't really understand, I could make a comment and got some feedback for that. And if I don't understand it, there's probably other people that would read it that wouldn't have quite understood exactly where they were coming from and so forth. And so it was nice to be able to give that type of feedback and to really participate in that process. And I do appreciate the opportunity to do that. And hopefully my comments were valuable to them, and like I said, it is, I considered it sort of a document for us. We have a lot of standard operating procedures. A lot of those go into more depth, but this is something that we can carry with us. We have it, if we need to do a manual block and we haven't done one for 3 years, we can pull it out and make a quick reference to what we need, the process that we need to go through to do that. So I don't know if you have any questions, comments.
Questions, comments from the board? I guess I just wondered if this, now this completed, is this something you actually then hand out to every employee, and do you have some sort of just update for them or information session for them on the changes that have been made, or?
We do.
Okay.
When it's handed out, they're putting together this document that outlines all of the changes that
Gotcha.
were made, and then there's a signature so that they have it.
All right.
So we know that they've received it. The other thing I would say is that this next go-around, as we get to the orange line, is that we're going to bring people like Carrie and people from Maintenance Way, rail equipment maintenance, facilities, Safety will be right at the table with us this next time around. I think because of the tight timeline we had with this go-around, we were able to do it that way. But this next go-around, I think we'll have people right at the table. And then we will also do the outreach to a larger audience this next go-around.
Good, thank you. Yeah, appreciate that. I also appreciate the operators that after looking at this, the things you need to keep into consideration as you're doing your job is, there's a lot. There's a lot there, so we appreciate that, and thank you for your commitment to safety. It's very much appreciated.
Thank you very much.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, now, let's move on to the consent agenda, okay? So the items that are on the consent agenda are considered to be routine and may be approved by the board in one blanket motion. Any board member may remove an item from the consent agenda portion of the agenda for discussion or questions by requesting such action prior to consideration of this portion of the agenda. Today we have 3 items on our consent agenda. Just to note, the approval of the board minute meetings for June 11, 2014, Resolution 14-0735 authorizing a series of contracts for on-call engineering, architecture, and related services. And then the third is Resolution 14-07-36 authorizing a modification to a contract with Wanaha, is that a Wanaha Group for project management and selected design services. So is there any item on the consent agenda any member of the board would like to see removed? Seeing none, is there a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented? I have a
Second.
have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, I'll move on with a question. Those in favor of the motion to approve the consent agenda, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion is approved unanimously. Thank you very much. So let's move on to the other resolutions that we have. We have 4 of them here this morning. The first resolution you've heard some testimony about, which is Resolution 14-07-37, which is adopting a strategic financial plan. And Mr. General Manager or Director Prosser, Mr. General Manager.
Let me defer to one of the key architects of this plan from the outset, which is Board Member Prosser.
Okay, this is the culmination of a lot of work and a long time in preparation. This process started a couple of years ago. I would like to recognize former board member Tiffany Schweitzer, who was on the board at the time that we started this. And when she went off the board, Travis jumped in and helped. And, you know, it was a total pleasure working with both Tiffany and Travis on this project. You know, they both get it. They're both totally bright people, very creative people. And, you know, it's the final project really reflects both of their efforts. Also want to recognize Dave Oxier, our CFO, and Sandy Vinci, who were also, hand in glove on this. And Beth DeHamel, CFO, when we started this, helped us get off to a good start. Dave came in. Sandy was there from the very beginning, and I think this really reflects, the quality of this reflects their help and support and input. I really do appreciate that. Our goal in this was to provide a set of guiding principles to keep this agency on a strong financial footing. We had a little bit of discussion earlier. There are a couple different approaches you can take to putting one of these things together. One is to, as we did here, to focus more on the principles and the guidelines to make clear what our underlying approach to financial management is and should be. The other would be to actually do a step-by-step roadmap. We thought it was more important to provide the principles. This is a very large and diverse agency. We have a lot of operating requirements. We have a very diverse customer base. We have a very diverse stakeholder group. And in those types of things, situations over time, issues come up, needs are felt, concerns are expressed, and it's easy to focus on the issue of the moment. and forget, the need for the long-term stability and the long-term commitment to the financial strength of the organization. And so by laying out our guidelines or principles, we have something that we can refer back to. I think the other thing, and as I said earlier during the public forum, I think, the comment that this is not a step-by-step plan, I think is absolutely valid. And we tried to address that by requiring that staff come back to us at the start of each budget process to identify what our financial forecast, our financial prognostication is at that point, and what kind of actions staff feel will be necessary to make sure that we are complying with these principles as we go through the coming budget and I would say even the near-term financial forecast. And that gives this board the opportunity to make sure that we're on the right track, that we're taking the right actions, and that we're moving forward, in compliance with these principles. We did have a lot of opportunities for public involvement, public comment. We did receive some comment as we went through the process. We did want more, quite frankly, and so we did reach out to several stakeholder groups. We have ATU, Opal, Cascade Policy Institute, Ride Connection, Clackamas County Business Association, members of our Budget Task Force, and the Urban League all responded to our invitation and came in and provided comments to us. Their comments were wonderful, and I think, as Mr. Charles indicated, the chance to sit down in a more informal setting and to actually discuss. And it was cool because we had everybody at the table. We had 2 sessions, and so the people chose which session they wanted to come to, and everybody at that session were at the table at the same time. So people were not only interacting with Bruce and Travis and myself, but they were interacting with each other. And that kind of interplay and discussion I found extremely valuable. And I really would like to thank those organizations for taking the time and the effort to come in and talk to us about this. I think it's really paid off and helped us to make a better product here. So I'm not going to go through the plan or the guidelines one by one. We discussed this at our briefing session, so the board is probably tired of listening to me go through those. But I know many folks in the audience were also there. It has been available and will continue to be available on our website. I feel really good about this product, and I really like to thank everybody who had a hand in helping to shape this. So I think we're ready to go forward.
You have any comments?
Just a couple of brief comments in regards to the strategic financial plan. As Director Prosser mentioned, this has been a significant project to move forward, and I will also want to give thanks to all the folks that Director Prosser referenced, both internally within our organization and then externally, the stakeholders and the input that they gave us. Is our way to continue to exist as a transparent organization, taking in that stakeholder comments and those efforts to ensure that we get a great product. And the organization is an organization that builds sustainability, but then also provides services to the folks that utilize the service in a way that complements everything else that we use in this region. I also want to touch on the fact that as we look at this strategic financial plan and as we look to the future, this gives not just us internally, some focus, and not those externally a little bit of insight, but it also begins to give those folks who look at TriMet as a significant resource as this entire region continues to expand from a population perspective. This lets everybody know the pages that TriMet is turning as we begin to look at our financial future and our own sustainability to ensure that we can respond to the needs as we get out to 2035. I know it's kind of a magical year for some of the planning that goes on. And when we look at things like the climate smart communities initiatives and what's going on there. This starts to lay that groundwork and that foundation for how we will financially manage this organization and the things and the efforts that we'll put into place as we move towards some of those goals that are outlined. And lastly, you know, a set of guidelines and principles like this, while you see us sitting here on the board today, you probably most likely won't see these same 4 members or the other 2 members by the year 2035. At least you would hope not. So, not that we don't love this. I'm just saying that we'll probably be older and move on to other opportunities. But ultimately, these principles and guidelines are developed to have a long-range perspective. And it's to extend our commitment to what we're doing here in this point in time and into the future. So it doesn't bind the hands of the folks that come after us. That's why we use the word should quite regularly throughout the product, because ultimately we want to give guidance from where we sit today and give some great visibility as to kind of what we see today and what we think we see in the future. And that visibility doesn't essentially say this is how things have to be in the year 2017 or 2019 or 2025. This is how we see it today, and we know that these things are dynamic and the economy is dynamic, so the future board members need to have some flexibility to respond to whatever is going on in the marketplace at that point in time and to respond to the stakeholders and their needs. But we did want to take the opportunity to spend a good amount of time outlining the principles and the guidelines as to how to get the organization further and further down the path to long-term financial sustainability, making sure that we take all this into consideration. And I want to thank, again, all the stakeholders that came. I specifically want to touch on the ATU and their leadership, because they came out and we had a great conversation and discussion with them, and as we know, we do need their assistance and their input as we move forward as an agency. They're a critical component of our team, and we need to make sure that we continue to engage them, and I want to thank them for being engaged and involved in that discussion, this conversation as we went along. I think that was very, very helpful. So with that, I'm very supportive, of course, of the strategic financial plan.
One thing that I did want to mention, and I'm kind of looking at Sandy, because I remember as we were preparing for this, I'm saying, one thing that I wanted to be sure to address was the Secretary of State audit and the comments that were in that audit directed to this project. And then I forgot to do it at the briefing, and I almost did it again. And so, Sandy, I finally remembered. During the Secretary of State's audit, we were in the process of putting this together. And we did have an opportunity to sit down with the auditors. We described what we were working on. We showed them what we had at that point. It was not their role to give us specific guidance on how it should be framed or what it should contain. But I did find it very encouraging that in their final report, they did recognize our effort, and they encouraged us to bring it to fruition. So that was kind of an outside review of this project and the importance of this project. And I very much appreciated that they took the time to give us the acknowledgement and encouragement to get to this point today. So.
Dr. Beth, do you have any other comments?
Fine, thank you. Thanks to the committee.
Yeah, I agree. I guess I would just add that I'm very comfortable with it and being involved in a portion of the development of this. And again, thanks to both Craig and Travis for their work and leadership on this one, and Tiffany as well. I think I agree with the permissive language. Giving us some discretion is appropriate, but I think it also gives us some very good sideboards in terms of where we are, and if we're not successful in our negotiations with the union, where we may want to look in the future. And I would point out for John Charles's information that actually I believe we were successful with in our last binding arbitration with the union and receiving some concessions and reductions in cost, which are right along the lines of the efforts that this plan suggests that we need to have. So we weren't all the way there, but we made some changes, and I know that binding arbitration ruling is being challenged by the union, and we probably won't hear till the end of the year about whether that is sustained or not. But I think we're making good progress, and it gives us a roadmap, as I said, if we are unsuccessful in keeping that work on. So I think it's a good piece of work. I think it will give us the reason to look at various other actions as we move forward. And I think with getting the continual reports on a regular basis of how we're doing, it will tell us and inform the board and the staff about where we need to make mid-course corrections to adjust to that. And I will point out finally, this is going to be a living document, I believe, that should be looked at and reviewed on a regular basis. So while I believe we're going to adopt this today, it doesn't mean that it's set in stone forever. So again, thank you for that. All right, with that, I'm going to see if we then have a motion to approve Resolution 14-07-37.
So move.
Have a motion?
Second?
I have a second. Is there any further discussion by the board? All right, then all in favor of approving the motion to approve Resolution 14-07-37, which is adopting a strategic financial plan, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed? Hearing none, the motion is approved unanimously. Thank you. Again, great work, you guys. Let's move on then to Resolution 14-07-38, which is authorizing a modification to the contract with Modern Railway Systems to implement positive train control for the West Side Express, the West, as we call it, commuter rail line. Mr. General Manager?
Board President, members of the board, you may recall that in January 2014, you actually approved an initial pre-implementation phase of this contract. And this whole contract, this effort really responds to new Federal Railroad Administration regulations that has come out over the last few years. And actually, those regulations were in response to a 2008 Act of Congress requiring positive train control, particularly in segments of the modern railway system where there is both a commuter service as well as freight service. And indeed, that's the case here in our partnership with the Portland and Western Railroad on the west alignment. So the initial pre-implementation phase, you might recall, was about $235,000. That was really allowing scope, engineering, discussions with Portland and Western, our other team partners on that, as well as our own staff, in terms of the best way to approach this and develop an implementation plan. That implementation plan is completed and priced, and that's the action that is before you today, is to approve the modification of the contract to include the implementation phase. That amount, in terms of total authorization, is the total cost right now is $8.3 million with an $850,000 recommended change order allowance in addition to that. I would note that actually the West system currently has many functions of the positive train control solution that the Federal Railroad Administration is requiring. And indeed, some of the complication of moving ahead with this is that we have some functions in place, and we need to add a few more as the FRA regulations became much more detailed. So one good piece of news is that we have some basic positive train control in place right now. More functions and more robust functions need to be added to be compliant with the FRA regulation. There's a timeline associated with the implementation of this, which is 2015, and what we, again, are in the position to actually be in one of, I think, relatively few commuter railroads who actually will meet that deadline with the approval of this contract. So with that, I'm certainly willing to answer questions. We believe that this is a competitive price. I would also tell you that this market is very challenged right now because there are work to put in positive train control systems all over the country, and so the limited resources are relatively stretched. So we feel very confident in our partnership here with Modern Railway Systems, who actually have a history of working on this alignment as well with us, and are able to layer on these new functions in, I think, a very cost-effective way compared to other implementation solutions that we've looked at in the past. And with that, we certainly have experts in the audience as well if you have questions.
It's really kind of an off-the-wall question. You know, this is a very large amount of money, but part of that is a result of the current environment where everybody, literally everybody, every commuter rail organization in this country is trying to get this done in a very limited amount of time. Is there any way to determine what kind of premium we're paying because of this time crunch?
I don't know that there is in terms of any, I'll see if Thomas Heilig, who's our expert in such matters, is able to answer that, or Dan. But what I would tell you is that if you follow this over time, the first estimate I saw for this was on the order of $14 to $15 million. So we've been able to work this down pretty substantially. So I'm actually very comfortable and frankly very pleased to see this price that's in front of. I do think that this is not an environment where you're going to find the sharpest pencil on all items, but I also think it's still fair value given the marketplace and where we are. It's very specialized work, and there's not a large number of contractors providing this work. Dan?
Good morning, Mr. President, members of the board. We don't know exactly how much the premium might be. There's probably something to it, but most of the increase in cost compared to when we brought this for the pre-implementation phase, at that time we had a projection of where we thought we would land. Most of the increase that has occurred since that time is scope increase that was developed through the pre-implementation work as they unraveled what would have to be done in order to fully meet this new regulation for a system that had never been tried before. They found just a lot more software updates and some additional work inside the locomotives compared to what our conceptual estimate was. We did a new fair cost estimate based on what we learned at the end of pre-implementation, and it was about 5% lower than what this price is. So perhaps that might be the difference. It's on that order of magnitude would be my guess.
Other questions? Yep.
So, I mean, I'm not an expert on positive train control. I haven't spent much time thinking about it in regards to what it takes to implement this. But how much of this PTC positive train control is a function of our locomotives? How much of it is a function of the actual track that the locomotives ride in?
So it's a combination is the answer, which is that there are functions that the locomotive performs, and there is onboard equipment to do that. There's also wayside equipment. There's also central control. And indeed, I think some of the complications associated with the highest level of positive train control is getting all of those elements to work in unison. And I would also note that the final element that's added in the FRA regulations is the location of workers in the wayside. So again, that the control system would actually would acknowledge when workers are in the trackway doing work. So, and that the train would respond, the signal system would respond in real time to those occurrences. So there are, if you will, electronic boxes that are installed in locomotives, but there's also modifications to the wayside signals as well as the central control software.
So our West train utilizes some of the freight rail, right?
Yes.
And is freight also required to do positive positive train control?
So if the freight moves within the same corridor, the answer is yes. If the freight moves outside of the corridor where we offer commuter service, the answer would be generally no.
So then the reason that this even has to occur on their tracks is because we're using it.
That's correct.
So if we weren't using it for commuter rail, then they wouldn't have to do positive train control.
That's correct.
Okay. So so we're in the process of purchasing, I believe, another locomotive engine.
Yeah, you've approved a budget for another
Correct.
DMU, and that would also have to be compliant with the PTC, but that would be relatively easy with something.
Correct, because
Yeah.
it would be something new, we can get
Right.
that built in. So essentially, the reason, I'm specifically kind of looking at, as any portion of this really relies on the freight side of the rail, requiring them to invest something, but really the reason that they even have to invest anything is the fact that we're using their rail for commuter. Otherwise, they wouldn't have to invest anything in
That's
positive
correct.
train control. Okay.
That's correct.
Excellent, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
Other questions? I have no further questions. Then, are we ready to move forward? Is there a motion then to approve Resolution 14-07-38? Excuse me. Yes, 38, authorizing the modification for this control system.
So moved.
So I have a move. I have a second. Is there any further discussion? I guess I would just say, again, the federal government was very concerned, obviously, I assume, with some of the major rail crashes that we saw back on the West Coast, and this would, again, eliminate those kind of problems. Is that correct?
That's correct. And I would also just note that our current system would have eliminated most of those occurrences. This is another layer of safety
Okay.
that really responds to the details of the FRA regulation.
That's what I want to hear. Okay. With that then, ready for the question? All right, all those in favor of the motion then to approve Resolution 14-07-38, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion is approved unanimously. Let's move on then to Resolution 14-07-39, which is authorizing a contract with Stacy and Whitbeck Incorporated for construction manager / general contractor services for the Blue Line Station Rehabilitation Project.
Board President, members of the board, in your budget, you've approved capital funds for the first year of a multi-year process to begin to rehabilitate and improve the original Blue Line stations, primarily between Hollywood and the end of the line in Cleveland. And actually, in that regard, there are a total number of 14 stations that would be affected and improved. There are a number of improvements that are contemplated, and again, this would be taken over a number of years, so we would just begin that process in this first year. We would have updates and renovations to the shelters, which would include lighting and other security features, including removing any places where transparency across the platform is not enhanced right now. We would include the infrastructure for the electronic fare system, which generally will move the fare equipment outboard from the platforms themselves. We would have improved access control to make sure that we're as safe as we possibly can be. We help delineate the fare paid zones from the non-fare paid zones, which helps our policing efforts in terms of ensuring great security in those platforms, helping with the pavers, the barriers, informational signage, repositioning of certain amenities for better sight lines, reconfiguration of our cable closed-circuit TV system so that we make sure that we have good visibility, painting and cleaning, and basically bringing them up to a much higher level of standard, that kind of standard that we see in our new construction. Many of these stations are now beginning to be about 30 years old in terms of their usage, so beginning to need these modernization and improvements. The projects overall are included in our capital asset management and investment plan, as we call it. Again, I think a very worthwhile series of investments over a period of time. Related to the actual contractual work, in February you approved that this contract could be awarded via the CMGC contracting method. Following upon that, we've had a procurement, and we had very good response from the marketplace associated with this procurement. We had responses from, as noted in your staff report, from 3 different contractors. They were all rated based on the proposed team, the work experience, the contracting plan, including MWESB contributions, and project management and price. And out of that evaluation, staff has recommended that the contract be awarded to Stacy and Whitbeck, Inc., both related to their qualifications and the points as well as price. The total contract work for the proposed station rehabilitation over the number of years is $11,162,442. So that would be the recommendation to you now. Related to diversity, I would just note that Stacy and Whitbeck expects to achieve at least a 17% goal, depending on this contract, but as you know, we work closely with our contractors to make sure that we maximize that as each element of work is ordered. So with that, we recommend your approval and certainly happy to answer your questions.
Do we have some questions from the board? Comments? Seeing none, then, do we have a motion to approve Resolution 14-07-39?
So moved.
Have a motion?
Second.
Have a second? Any further questions? I'll call the question on the motion then. All those in favor of the motion to approve Resolution 14-07-39, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion is approved unanimously. And then the final resolution for today is Resolution 14-07-40, which is authorizing the purchase of real property located at 3520 Southeast 20th Avenue. Mr. General Manager.
Mr. Board President, members of the board, you may recall from your last briefing that we presented this material to you as well, so I'll try to keep it relatively brief today. But as you well know, we were actually impacted by the Portland to Milwaukee Light Rail project, and our former facilities building is now part of the street right-of-way. And we have been searching for a replacement facility, and actually have had some trouble finding a location that was close in to our other facilities that also met our physical requirements in terms of space inside as well as parking space outside for service vehicles. And again, this is a facilities management facility that we would propose to establish at this location. Recently, a piece of property came on the market, which is just across the Union Pacific track from our Center Street facility. Will be right across the new rebuilt Lafayette pedestrian bridge from our campus at the Center Street area. And the sizing of the property was really just perfect for the facilities management need. This is a willing seller, willing buyer transaction. We made an offer equivalent essentially to the asking price, and that offer was accepted. And that is, of course, contingent on your approval of the acquisition of this property. Total value of the property is $1,350,000. We would also have some rehabilitation budget associated with that, or tenant improvement budget associated with that. But even adding that into it, this is actually at or below our budget for the replacement facility management building. Again, this is being funded because, again, we were impacted by the Portland-Milwaukee project by project funds for the most part. So with that, I'd recommend your approval.
Questions? So, the question of the Portland-Milwaukee Light Rail project pays the majority of the price of the property?
That's correct.
Okay. And you're doing your due diligence now, and will
We
pursue
are.
if you don't find anything in your environmental or other review
Exactly.
of the property. Okay. Is there somebody ready to make a motion to approve Resolution 14-07-40?
So moved.
Second.
Your motion and a second. Any further questions by the board? Well, hearing none, then I'm going to call a question on the motion to approve Resolution 14-07-40. All those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion is approved. Thank you. I see nothing else on our agenda, business meeting today. Is there anything else, Mr. General Manager?
No, sir.
Anything else from the board? All right, then the meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much.
Thank you.